Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of the Gurumantra podcast. And here is your Guru Charan Kumar. Today, we have a special student speaker, Anvi Rawat, who scored 6 points in the ESS and total 36 points in IB for the class of 2022. Anvi, welcome to the Gurumantra podcast. And please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you for having me. My name is Anvi, and I studied in Pathways for the past 7-8 years. I will be going to Durham University to pursue English literature. My hobbies include I'm proficient in playing guitar, and I really enjoy reading. Also, I have taken up writing as a part of. I aspire to go into the publishing and editing career.
Thank you, Anvi. So, Anvi, we will first go with some of the questions related to the paper one. Can you tell how did you manage your time effectively during the examination for the paper one? Paper one is only 1 hour. Did you have any tips or strategy for allocating the time for different section or questions in the paper one? So, what is your personal experience?
I think the key is to read the resource booklet in the 5 minutes of reading time that everybody gets in the beginning, and then one can choose what they prefer, whether to answer the 6 marker first or to answer their smaller questions first. Personally, I used to read the 6 marker during the reading time and make sure that I keep that in my mind as I'm going through the resource booklet. And then I would answer the smaller questions and set a time limit for myself, which would be around 25 minutes or 30 minutes. Because when you do the smaller questions first, you are basically getting a more thorough understanding of the resource booklet, and it helps you include everything from all the data set in your final essay question, which makes up for a huge amount of your points and is actually a determinant in whether you can get a 6 or a 7. So personally, I think also that during these small examinations, the school-based summatives and the trials that people have, they can test however it is that they feel they should answer whether they should answer the 6 marker first or the smaller questions first, and really set a pattern for yourself and not change anything in the last moment. Just trust the process and give your examination.
That's a good strategy. Now, Anvi, can you tell how solving the past paper help you or generally any students for preparing for the paper one? I know I have given the booklet and you have taken it very serious. I have seen some of the classes, you have completed some of the past paper booklet. So what strategy or student should employ while practicing, especially using the past paper?
So the resource booklet was actually really helpful for me while I was studying for the trials, because for me, all my exams kind of clumped up together in 2 weeks. And I had really less time beforehand. So really going through all the questions I had answered beforehand was really helpful. Doing the past paper booklets, as Guru sir always says in class, it helps you get an understanding of what the examiner wants from you, and which is really the key, because in IB, we cannot really pursue an examiner to understand our points. So we got to understand how they work and answer according to that. So the past paper booklets, first of all, in time management, if you set a time limit for yourself to complete a particular paper, it's going to be really helpful in the finals. But also it really helps you understand and also predict what kind of questions you can get in your finals, because paper one and paper two each have very unique patterns, and it's very easy to predict what you can get, which topics can be asked. So suppose for me, I had done the past papers for the past 10 years, as Guru Sir had given, and also I found some online. They really help you narrow down the kind of topics that are usually asked. And if you can pay more attention to them and they come, then the revision's really helpful.
Correct. Past paper always give you a perspective about what examiner want. That's the important point. So now, Anvi, can you tell about in paper one, there are many difficult questions always students have to face, especially 6 mark question, 2 marks, sometimes 4 marks. So how did you approach some of the difficult question in the paper one? What step did you take to tackle the question which is very tough or difficult on the paper one?
I really used to like answering essay questions. So 6 markers were really nice for me because it used to help me do a rundown of all the things I knew I had to include. So I don't think it was common for everybody, but for me, the smaller questions were more challenging because I found myself losing more marks over there than I gained in my 6 marker. And the key to that, I realized later on, was always remembering the ketones, because it's nothing out of the course, and the resource booklet is really helpful, but it's going to mean nothing if you don't understand the keywords and know when you have to apply them. And the mark schemes, if the students would notice, is mostly based on the ketones. So for me, I guess some people would have a hard time with answering 6 markers, and the advice for that would be to always write down in small bullet points in your question booklet what all you want to include in your 6 marker while you're going through those small data sets. But beforehand, before the examination, I would always recommend going through the key terms to answer the smaller first questions.
Brilliant. Anvi, I have seen last 2 years, most of your ESS classes, you always be active in the class. You sit, write notes, participate in the class. I always encourage you to participate and you always take it very serious about ESS class. Now, regarding to this, can you tell how Guru Sir's ESS class help you to achieve highest score in your final IB ESS exam?
So ESS was actually a class where I put in a lot of my efforts, and I think that was because of how much you demanded from us. It's nice when you know that a teacher is demanding something and you're able to give it. Those small things that we used to have, like doing those Monday tasks where you would ask us questions and give us articles and go ask us to analyze them. I always made sure I did those. And when you give us small homeworks in beginning in 11th grade, then you used to give us small worksheets. I think it's basically being consistent. For me as a student was a huge problem because I'm not really a kind of person who can have a daily schedule and study on a daily basis. But with ESS, if in any class you have smaller tasks that your teacher keeps giving you and you convince yourself, you prepare yourself to complete them, then that helps you a lot during your finals. Because as I've said before, all my finals were clumped up, so I didn't really have the time to go through all 8 chapters in the end and make sure I remembered everything. So when you have been doing the same thing for the past 2 years, it sticks in your brain. And with ESS, it's very easy to relate everything to real life as you had done in the class, and you've given us so many examples. So it's more easy to interpret and understand. And when you understand something in the core, you're able to apply it to your answers, especially your essay questions and your 6 markers. So in that way, your presentations help a lot.
Very intellectual answer. Thank you, Anvi. Now we are going to see some of the questions related to paper 2. Anvi, I still remember I used to tell to my present grade 11 and 12 student also, your handwriting, I still remember your handwriting plays a very important role to put all your efforts in a fantastic way. I think in our batch there are only few students have a fantastic handwriting. Your handwriting I always appreciate. Now my question is, can you tell in paper 2 what are some effective techniques for handling 5 and 6 marker questions? How can ensure the concise and accurate response, especially 5 and 6 mark question? What you have done?
So again, when it's paper 2 is for 2 hours, and when you have that much of a time, sometimes especially me, I used to take my time and I used to go really slow, and then I had to cramp up everything in the last 30 to 45 minutes because people don't realize that the reason the paper is for 2 hours is because that's how much content an examiner needs from you. So I think even for paper 1, it's nice that everything is divided into sections, that you can mentally divide it into sections so you can allot yourself a time span to complete each of those sections. For example, in paper 2, we have section A and section B. Personally, as I've said before, I really like the essay questions. So I knew what I had to write in those. And the smaller questions are always more challenging for me because I guess IB prepares you for longer questions more than they prepare you for shorter questions. Yes. So I used to set a timeline for 45 minutes for my section A. And even if I was missing out on a couple of questions, I still used to make sure that I'm skipping past them and I come back.
So Anvi, can you tell what are some effective techniques for handling the 5 and 6 mark question in paper 2? How can anyone ensure the concise and accurate response in paper 2 for 5 and 6 mark? What is your personal experience?
Personally, IB tends to prepare you for longer questions in all the subjects rather than shorter questions. And for me, ESS was the only subject which I had, which demanded shorter questions. And in the beginning, you won't realize how many points the person can lose in those smaller questions. So it's nice that paper 1 and paper 2 are divided in a way, or you can mentally divide them in a way that you can allot yourself a time span to complete them. For paper 2, if it's 2 hours and people don't realize that it's 2 hours because the examiner expects that much content from you. So you need to really put in everything you have in those 2 hours and fill the paper with as much knowledge as you have about the subject. So for section A, personally, I gave myself 45 minutes. And even if I was having some trouble in some questions, I used to leave them and give myself enough time to come back to them in the end, as to not ponder over one question for more than 5 minutes and then get yourself stuck in your essay question. And as I've mentioned before, I really used to like essay questions. So section B was kind of easier for me. Guru sir would always tell us before the paper how many points he expected from each question. For 4 markers, he wanted 8 points. And for the 9 markers, he wanted 18 points. So I always made sure I had those. I made small bullet points with the keywords. And I gave myself maximum 5-6 minutes to do that. it's easier to choose your essay questions based on the 9 marker, because even if you're unsure about your 4 marker, you can still nail the 9 marker and get a good amount of score. So
Good.
it's easier when you have all your bullet points down.
Yes. So my next question is also related to the 9 mark only. So Anvi, can you tell what strategy would you recommend for effectively structuring in a 9 mark essay question? Because I have seen some of your best answer, you effectively structure a 9 mark question. So from your experience, give me some strategy to structure the 9 mark essay questions.
It's how teachers have always told us to write essays, that everything needs to be balanced and you can't be too biased to a single point of view. And ASS is a subject in which you view everything from different perspectives and different approaches. So you can't expect to abandon that thought during your 9 marker. Balance is always the key, because even if you cannot be too much in favor of an opinion and you cannot be too against it, you have to make sure that you give a balanced opinion that favors your question. So to get those points, it's a kind of a trick I used. So for the resource booklet you gave us, I noted down the common keywords in all the questions, which was sometimes they'll be regarding eutrophication, or sometimes they'll be regarding pollution, and I would jot down points for that, which I made sure I remembered. And it's actually very helpful because there's not a lot of room for 9 markers. So the topics for that is really narrowed down. If you can guess some kind of questions that'll come and get some generic points jotted down from the mark schemes and everything, you can really hack the 9 marker, because you know the kind of points the examiners have expected beforehand.
Brilliant. So now tell me, Anvi, time management is crucial in paper 2 exam and the 2 hours. So what advice would you give for effectively managing any student's time during the paper 2?
It would be same as paper 1. It's doing the past papers and setting a stopwatch or setting a timer to make sure you get it done in that time. Strictly adhering to that, because when you're at home and you're doing it yourself, you can relax a little, but you have to make sure that you put yourself under examination conditions so you can prepare yourself for examination conditions. Because you're not going to get a single second more. Invigilators during your finals are not going to let you keep writing, and you can actually risk your papers getting cancelled. So it's not something you can actually risk, and it's always better to prepare yourself mentally for that. And also allotting time spans in your head for each question. You tend to get a fairer idea of that the more exams you give, and 11th and 12th and trials. So it won't be that difficult. It's just preparing yourself mentally.
Wow, that's brilliant. Anvi, I still remember whenever I give any feedback on paper 2, you always take it very serious. From grade 11 to grade 12, I have given so many feedback, but you always come up with that perfect feedback. It is completed and you come up with a different perspective. Now tell me, on the paper 2, how Guru sir feedback in paper 2 help you to score a better marks?
As I've said before, paper 2 it has a lot of content that you can write, that you can include, and it's impossible for a student to cover everything. And with your feedbacks, you always made me realize everything that I had missed during an examination, everything that I could have included. So I always remembered those. I always remember those feedbacks. I tried to incorporate them in my next examination. And you always told me if I did include it or if I failed to include it. So when you have those consistent feedbacks, you keep it in your mind. You keep it in your mind that, okay, the examiner needs this from you. And you tend to include that in your final examination. You tend to make sure you don't do anything wrong, and all the feedback comes rushing into your head. So that's why I would always recommend taking feedback from Guru Sir. Paper 1, paper 2, or IA.
Thank you, Anvi. Anvi, now we are moving to some of the questions related to ESS IA. Listeners, please note, Anvi IA is one of the best IA for the class of 2020. She has done an IA on Brazil, Amazon rainforest. It's a stupendous IA, and those who want to see it, it is available on the essgurumantra.com. Anvi, please note, your IA is for next 2 years, it will be exemplary IA for many students, because I still remember how many feedback, and I can tell you many PhD candidates also, they cannot do that kind of the quality. So now, Anvi, can you tell what is the important aspect to consider for anyone, any students, before starting the ESSI?
Timeline. I would always say it's timeline. I was not very good in my MYP. In my MYP journey, I had digital design as a portfolio, and I was always behind on my deadlines, and it never ended well for me. So I was determined that in DP, I would not do such a thing. For all of my IAs and EE and TOK, I always made sure that I had to stick to the deadlines that the teachers gave us, because there's a reason. The sooner you can give your work, the better feedback, because the more time a teacher can give to your work and the better feedback they can give to you. There's always a reason that deadlines exist. And And in ESS, that was the only subject in which our IAs had part by part deadlines. So you expect a criterion A by 1 week, and then the next week you give us time in class to complete the other. So it wasn't like I was coming back home at 4 and I had to sit down and work on my IA. I could have done that in school too. And if I had a doubt.
So Anvi, can you tell what is the most important aspect to consider before starting any one ESSIA?
I would say it's always making sure you adhere to your timeline. Teachers are more experienced with how students deal with grade 11 and grade 12, because suddenly grade 12 gives you a lot of pressure which you're not prepared for in grade 11. So it's more about trusting the teacher's instincts about how you'll be able to complete your work. For me, I'm not really good at following deadlines. And in ESS, Guru sir always gave us, he gave us targets to achieve. He told us to complete these 3 topics in this class and then to submit the other 3 topics by the next Friday or by Monday, by giving us a weekend to cover the work. So I guess that was always really helpful in making sure that I was not lacking behind, and also that my work did not pile up in the end and I didn't have to jam everything through. And because 12th can be really heavy with all the deadlines and TOK and EE and everything. So it's nice when you have somebody helping you out with your timeline and your schedules. Brilliant. And it's important to adhere to those.
That's an important tip. And could you share some example of common mistake that ESS students often make in their IA and how to avoid it?
I'm not sure about other IAs, but for me in my beginning drafts, I'm sure Guru also noticed, was that I put in a lot of information because sometimes in topics like mine, which was the correlation between meat production and deforestation, I felt as though I had to explain a lot, and in that I filled it up with a lot of content, which led me to stray from the topic, which is not a good idea because, first of all, IAs have word limits, and it's not a good idea to dump information on an examiner because they do not want to know all the things that are not really related to the topic. It's more like they want to assess how much you know about your own topic. So I think a mistake people can make is prioritizing content over quantity over quality. And that's why the future feedbacks become really helpful, because for me, sir helped me a lot in narrowing down the information I had to put in and making sure that I didn't go off topic or I didn't miss out on a particular key term.
Good. So Anvi, why it is important for ESS students to have a thoroughly understand the ESS criteria before they start the ESS IA?
I guess I can be really complicated for people because we don't really understand how internal assessments work. Each person tries to choose the topic, but there are certain things they need to include in the topic. So knowing beforehand that you have to include certain criteria, you have to show an understanding, you have to show how analytical you are, how critically you think. All these things need to be kept in mind while you're choosing a topic to make sure that the topic you choose actually gives you an area to include all of these. Also, there are many instances in which children can forget to include small things, which the examiner is going to look for, which causes them to lose marks. And I always believe that IAs are the best way to ensure that you get good marks in your subject. So when you have a checklist and you have these criteria, then it's more feasible for a person to actually adhere to those and make sure that they're fulfilling what they are what is demanded by them through the internal assessments.
Brilliant. Listeners, please note, Anvi got in a ESS IA 7. Getting a 7 in the ESS IA is not an easy task. I have seen an IA personally. She has put her blood and sweat. So Anvi, now can you tell top 3 tips to score 7 on the ESSI?
I guess it'll be difficult to narrow it down to 3, but I would say first would be consistency. Always making sure that you are thorough with everything you're doing. You're on time with everything you're doing, and you include all the things that are needed by you. Second would be understanding the topic you choose. Because I guess sometimes people don't realize that they are needed to show an understanding of their topics, and they sometimes try to complicate their topics by picking something which seems more complex, so it would get them a better mark. Honestly, I think it's better to go with a more easy topic if you're sure that you can put your best into it and you understand it. You understand its base, you understand its workings, so you're able to communicate with the examiner all the things that you wanted to tell. And the last would be IAs, because for me, all the past IAs that were on Guru's website were really helpful in making sure that the small subtopics that are required by the IA. I would have missed those if I hadn't seen past high-scoring IAs. So those would be 3.
Brilliant. So you mentioned about ESS Gurumantra. That is my next question. So Anvi, now can you tell me how ESS Gurumantra website help you to achieve the score in your ESS IA?
The website, not only in IA, it is really helpful in all the different resources it provides, like the case studies and the resource booklets and the past papers. But for me personally, I found myself using it mostly for my IA. The past IAs are really helpful in two ways. Firstly, I guess it motivated me in a way that I saw my seniors and I saw these past students realistically get really good scores, and that made me think that using the same phenomena, using the same regime, I could also achieve such scores. And also, as I've mentioned before, there are really small subtopics and small things that you might end up missing out if you are attempting to do the IA by yourself. But when you see your past students, your seniors who have included these small things that seem to have made a lot of difference, and also Guru Sir has the marks right next to it along with the feedback, so you can see which were the parts of different IAs that stood out to examiners, and you make sure that you can include them into yours and get a score as good as them. In that way, I guess it's really nice that we don't have to go around searching for different IAs because Guru Sir had put those together for us.
Brilliant. And we have a last couple of questions. Now, what is the one fact that makes studying ESS is unique and interesting in comparison to the other DP subjects?
I had a huge variety. I had a very diverse range of subjects, which I picked them on a random, actually. It wasn't planned. And ESS was one of them. But I guess the thing that stood out to me the most was how easy it was to see the phenomena you read in class and see them in real life. Because as I've said before, it's really easy to apply them into real life because of how much Guru Sir helped us. But also it's complex relationships, right, between environment and between society and between our daily lives. And you can see how relevant it is to the world today. Small topics like resource management and pollution and climate change, all of these, you see them manifesting all around you. And when you can think back to your classroom and you can think, okay, so these are the ways in which it's affecting communities and affecting wildlife and affecting biodiversity. All of those actually made it really intriguing to continue studying ESS and to enhance my knowledge in the subject.
That's a brilliant. And I always say to others, you always sit silently in the class. Finally, your name is on the toppers list and you got one of the topper in the ESS. So now this question is the last one. Can you tell how different was your journey in ESS than you expected it to be in terms of learning and the expectation from the subject?
ESS wasn't the first science that I chose. I actually chose biology, but during the first week, I realized how it was not meant for me. And I guess I came into ESS with the same mindset that everybody has when they begin ESS. That's going to be easy. That it's going to be easier to get a 7 than the other sciences. But I think that was a misconception. ESS it had more content than I realized. It needed more efforts than I realized. But in the end, I guess why people say that it's easier to get a 7 in ESS is because of how easy, as I've said before, it is to understand the concept. I did not anticipate putting in as much effort and as many hours as I did into the subject, but I guess it was actually a rewarding experience, so I don't regret it.
Wow. Anvi, it's an amazing conversation with you about your success. And all your experience will be a lesson for many DP and ESS students who want to achieve a high grade like Anvi. Your final words.
I want to express my gratitude to you for inviting me as a guest on your show. I've listened to it during my past years in IB, so it was really nice being a part of it and sharing my experiences and my insights with you. And I hope it will actually help other students.
Thank you for listening to the Gurumantra podcast with your host Gurucharan Kumar. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all tips and tricks about the ESS. Thank you, listeners, and thank you, Anvi.